All right. So we've been discussing all along. We've been discussing the sefiros hegenuzos, and one of the inyonim of the sefiros hegenuzos is that the bechinas pshitus, and therefore the bechinas achtus, achtus and pshitus, which means that they form really essentially one unit, and it's impossible to really describe what any particular one of them is because they're bechinas his arvus. They're all together. So the question is asked then. Why do we then say that there are sefiros? Um, sefiros hegenuzos. There must be some kind of hagbola. We say, yeah, there is a hagbola, but the hagbola is only in potential. And meanwhile, all the sefiros hegenuzos are davuk in the Or Ein Sof before the tzimtzum, because it's before the tzimtzum. And that's why, in fact, the tzimtzum was necessary. The tzimtzum was necessary in order for there to be a situation um, where the sefiros could be individuated and they could come out as the hagbola of the or for the sake of the medida and hagbola of the oiros that would be melubash later on in kalim. That's basically where we were up to. Um, and had it not been for the tzimtzum, and they would have nevertheless been miskale, there would have been mizgal b'bechinas echad, b'bechinas his arvus kulam and b'bechinas bli gvul. So, for the sake of the ishtalshalos, for the sake of the oire, the kalim and the sefiros of the sefiros later on, it was necessary to have a tzimtzum in the shorish of the oires. Okay, that's where we got up to, and we're now on Perek Chof Gimel. This is Perek Chof Gimel. And again, just to remind you, the inyan of the sefiros hegenuzos is the sefiros in the oir, not the sefiros of the kalim. That's not called the sefiros. The kalim come from the rishimo, and the sefiros hegenuzos are the shorish of the oir of the sefiros, at least according to this shita that the Rebbe Rashab is going on over here. Okay, so we'll continue. Moshol bazeh kuma b'kibbutz b'tziruf gimel adalad oisis yachad. The moshol is going to give is actually a very interesting and very mechuvan moshol for such a thing. Um, when you have a number of letters strung together in a way that they make sense. In other words, there's an oir that's sort of makif the oisius. Each ois brings its own inyan, but together they have something beyond each of the oisius. In other words, the meaning of the word. And the example of the word that he uses the word baruch, as we're going to see now. בקיבוץ צירוף אחד צירוף ג' וד' oisis יחד, נעשה מהם טבע אחס. Make a word. Asher he kli, that word is a kli. Haskola says the inyan is the inyan. It gives you some understanding of some particular inyan. Shaskola zu muvenes mitoch oisius elu, that this concept is understood from these letters. Al derech moshel tevas baruch, like the word baruch. So what does the word baruch mean? The word baruch, as he'll explain, essentially means the inyan of hamshocha. Yeah, la havrich sagefen is the lotion of the Mishnah, to bring down one of the tendrils of the vine and plant it in the ground in order for it to grow new shoots and to grow a new part of the vine. That's called lahavrich esagefen, right? To bring it down and plant it in the ground. That's the in the baruch hamshocha milamayla lamata. So again, al derech moshol tevas baruch shebetziruv dalad oisius yachad musag umuskal bazeh inyan brocha. We'll understand the inyan of brocha when that word is comprised of the letters. And when the letters are in this particular order, then they give the idea of baruch. If they were in a different order, will be a different word, a different concept, maybe related, but nevertheless a different or makif that includes the entire word. In other words, all the letters themselves represent a certain koyach. Each letter represents a certain koyach. And then there's the overarching makiftik koyach, which is the meaning of the word, which comes about by tziruf, by way of tziruf of the oisius. So again, yachar musang muskal bazeh inyan brocha, shehu shemavarchu ish Shegadol is Rabbe Tuvoy v'chayav harizeh haskolas inyan mamish. What's inyan of a brocha? That he should grow and his chayus should grow and so on and so forth. He should be, he should be the old Jewish brocha. You should be well and healthy and rich. That's basically the inyan. So there's a haskolas inyan mamish. We understand the inyan. Ugabi brocha elyoina. And if we're talking about brocha coming milamale, in other words, from Hakadosh Baruch Hu, we're talking about here the makor of the brocha. It's hinted to the makor of the brocha. B'tayvus baruch. In the word baruch, we hint to the makor of the brocha. As it says in Tikkunim, the baruch Rosh Tevis. Baruch, the word baruch is the Rosh Tevis. Now, not in the right order, but it doesn't matter for this particular inyan. It's the Rosh Tevis umakor kol brocha. Rosh umakor kol brocha. So we have the Reish, we have the Vav, we have the Chaf, and we have the Beis, right, for the word Baruch. Rosh umakor kol brocha. But that's the shorish of the brochas up above. V'hainu shorish ha-brocha. Shenimshach b'bchinas ha-keser. The shorish ha-brocha comes from keser. It comes from a madrega of makif. In other words, the or that is nimshach afterwards actually comes from an or makif, and it's that or makif which is mitzaref those oisias together in a certain oifen to mean the inyan of Baruch. And where does that come from? That's a koyach in keser. That inyan of the tziruf oisias beyachad is the inyan of keser, and it brings down that particular inyan. Bazaya pashas ikev, the Reish Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph, the Baruch hu b'chochma. Now, there's not a stira. We're saying that the inyan of Baruch is b'chochma, the shorish of Baruch is in keser, right? The inyan of Baruch is in chochma, and bifrat yesod of chochma, yesod Abba, as I'll explain now. The Baruch hu b'chinas hu b'chochma, hu b'derech klal hu b'chinas yesod Abba. That's the inyan of the hamshocha of the brocha milamayla from its root, which is in keser, is via yesod Abba. Yesod Abba is the hashpoa of Abba, the hashpoa of chochma, klapei the other sefiros. Moira Oyer is a sefer, sort of a dictionary of Kabbalah. Interesting sefer. There's a difference between the word Baruch and the word bracha. Baruch is either a verb or an adjective, and bracha, Baruch is in the male how do you say, the male form, and bracha in the female form, right? So yesh hefresh ben Baruch levracha. Di'ihu Baruch, he is Baruch. In other words, the male form is Baruch. B'chinas yesod Abba. Ve'ihi, the word bracha, ihi bracha b'chinas yesod Ima. So ihu refers to Abba, to the sphere of Chochma, and bifrat yesod Chochma, yesod Abba, and bracha in the feminine form is yesod Ima. Okay, both of these inyonim of the hashpoa of brocha klape chutz, the inyan of Yesod, is to connect it to Malchus, which is the inyan of hashpoa into Malchus. So Yesod Abba hashpoa into Malchus of the partsuf of Abba, and when it comes to Yesod Ima, that's hashpoa into Malchus of the partsuf of Ima. Each partsuf has a full 10 sefiros in them. So the part of Ima has 10 sefiros, part of Abba has 10 sefiros, etc. Okay. V'yesh hefresh ben Baruch the brichas hashachar. There's a difference between in the meaning of Baruch when we're talking about the brachas that we say in the morning, brichas hamitzvos and brichas hamitzvos and brichas hanenin. All of these have different qualities. The brachas, brichas hashachar, are shevach v'hodah to Hakadosh Baruch Hu. The bracha of the mitzvahs is because we're about to do a mitzvah midaraisa, and therefore we say a bracha, or a mitzvah rabbanon for that matter. Brachas hanenin is because we're about to enjoy something, right? A bracha before eating. Each of them are a different type of hamshocha, a different type of inyan. He's going to explain a little bit, but that's the point is just to explain the hamshocha from Lamaila. When we're talking about the sefiros hegenuzos, how they are in the makor and how they are when they nimshach. and he's going to explain it shortly. Right. So in any event, all of these inyonim, all of these brachas, even though there's differences between them, in general, they're all milamala lamata. In other words, hamshocha milamala lamata. All of them, the word baruch over there means in one sense or another, hamshocha. Birchas hashachar is shevach v'haidah, and it's mamshich the inyonim of zukev kfufim, malbish harumim, matir asurim, and so on and so forth. Birchas hashachar. Birchas hamitzvahs, it's mamshich the inyan hasheket shon zveis of itzivanu. It's mamshich the inyan into the mitzvah, whatever the particular mitzvah happens to be. And Birchas Hanehenin is mamshich or into the food that you're about to eat. Birchas Hanehenin. Okay, so hein, excuse me, shahen milamala lamata. Birchas Hamida, whereas the brachas of tefillah, particularly the Hamida, milamata lamaila. In other words, the brachas of tefillah are not hamshocha milamaila lamata. They are ha'ala'a, raising up or elevating from below to above, elevating the person. So the brachas of Shmona Esrei are not so much the inyan of Hamshocha, but rather the inyan of Ha'alo'a, Milamata Lamaila, ascending from below to above or elevating the person elevating himself through his tefillos. Okay, Ramaz. Ramaz is one of the Pirushim. Rabbi Moshe Zakuta is one of the Pirushim on the Zohar and in various other. He wrote a lot of Sforim too, and he comments on a lot of different things. A very distinguished Makubal, Rabbi Moshe Zakuta. Ramaz beZohar Sham, where he writes in the Zohar on this particular inyan of the bracha being Yesod Abba and Yesod Ima, etc., etc. Einmal shikasu ba belikut Torah, die Ramas kam mipalgi b'mesivta derakia. I don't remember where this is now. In look at the Torah, I think it's in Yikra, if I'm not mistaken. I know everybody says miflegi, but the proper word is mipalgi, from Loshen Peleg, to divide. There's an argument. Kamipalgi b'mesivta derakia, they were arguing or discussing, disagreeing in Mesivta Rakia. In any event, so it's explained, this Indian is explained over there in the Torah, Ubesidur, the Pirush Baruch Shomar. And the Siddur also has a mimer on this Indian of the Indian of Brochas. Al Kupanim, Harish Betevas Baruch, we understand therefore that in the word Baruch, Yesh Baze Haskola Gadoila. There's tremendous Haskola. For those of you who came in late, the basic idea that we're discussing over here is the Hamshocha of the sefiros hegenuzos has to be done after the tzimtzum. What's the inyan of the tzimtzum? The inyan of the tzimtzum is to be mafrid one ois from another, right? So that the or klali or the or makif, which includes all of them, is not nimshach. Adarabba, that's what the tzimtzum was. The tzimtzum was the histolkos of that or, which was matarif everything together, which made everything into one, and ma'arev everything, made it all yachad, right? So it's explaining this by way of the word Baruch. The word Baruch is four different letters, Beis, Resh, Vav, Chav. But when you take the word together, so it brings you a haskola that's much greater than each of the oasis individually. Even if you had all of the oasis individually, but you didn't put them together, or you put them together in a different tziruf, in a different format, you wouldn't understand the word Baruch from them. So therefore, the word Baruch is a sort of a transcending oir, which includes all of these letters and brings you an idea which is much greater than any of the letters themselves. And he's going to explain this even in greater depth. The word Baruch, Yesh B'Seh Haskola Gadol, has tremendous depth to it, and tremendous depth of understanding and intelligence to this particular word. Now, Vehine. How does this relate to our sefiros? He's going to explain. When you start to learn with a child, now, it should be lalamed. As he says soon, he's going to use the word umalamdim oisoi. But It could be that it's just a misprint, or it could be that's the way that they said it in those days. I don't know. But my feeling is that it's actually a when the Rebbeim said something, they often said it with more than one mashmoes, with more than one intention, with more than one meaning. And I think the intention here is that when a person is learning Aleph Beis, or he's teaching Aleph Beis to a kid, you're not just teaching Aleph Beis to a kid, you're learning something yourself. At least that's the way it should certainly be. When you're teaching something, you should be learning it at the same time. So hinek shmatchilim lilmoid letinoik. Don't think that a tinoik, a little kid, is just he's just a little kid. He doesn't know anything, and therefore you're only teaching him, and you're not learning anything from it. You're just giving over what you already knew a long time ago. No, you're learning something new every time you teach. That's at least the way it should be. Hinek shmatchilim lilmoid letinoik she'enu mevin tziruf ha'oisias. Yachad, when you're teaching a child that doesn't know how to join the letters together, and you're teaching him at this point in time only the oises themselves. So you start off with the ois aleph and the ois base, and the comments aleph comments base ba, right? You're teaching him one letter only. Loimar, they're always plain, and you tell him this is the letter aleph, this is the letter base, the little dalet gim, or whatever it may happen to be. Shemarin loirak ois base levad. In the word Baruch, you'll be showing him the letter, only the letter base. Mimitayvus Baruch. Parizet tzimtzum legame hamelamed. To teach him only the letter base is for sure a tzimtzum. Even though he should be learning something himself, but nevertheless it's a tzimtzum because he's only teaching him one letter of the word and he knows the meaning of the word. But tzimtzum hu, in this particular case, if we're talking about the word, right? The word Baruch, you're only teaching the base and not the rest of the word, the Reish Vav Chaf, in addition. So for that Melamed, this is a tzimtzum, he's mitzamtzem, and so to speak, takes the base out of its context of the word Baruch, and he teaches only the word base, the letter base rather. Because the tinoik doesn't understand it when it's joined together with the other letters. He can only understand at this point in time one letter at a time. Kim unless it's only one letter at a time. That's all that he can understand. He can only understand one letter at a time. You can't teach him a whole word before you teach him the letters that make up the word, that comprise the word. Okay. And with this division of the word into letters, into its component constituent letters, shenimshach ois beis levad, that only one letter, the first letter of the word Baruch, is nimshach. Hari yarad bazeh har b'mimadregosoi. The base is on a much lower madrega than it now as a separate letter than it was when it was attached to the other words forming the word Baruch, the other letters rather forming the word Baruch. Shenistalik mimeno ha'oyer, the oyer that united the entire teva, the entire word together. It was nistalik because you're only teaching him the base. Shenistalik mimeno ha'oyer v'lo nishabo rak ma'at mina or shayabo. You're only teaching him a little tiny little bit of the or that was there. In other words, the overarching makitik, or you're not teaching him. You're only teaching him the ois base, which is kilu the or pnimi. Right? The or pnimi with the meaning of the letter base itself, not the letter base in the context of a larger word, Baruch, which is mamshich and or makif. Shehare mitchila shaya mutzur b'teves Baruch, when that letter was part of the word Baruch, hayabo haskola the Baruch canal. It would have had the concept and the ideas behind the word Baruch implicit in it, or even explicit in it, because the word Baruch has a certain meaning, and people know what that meaning is. And as soon as you hear the word Baruch, you know. Someone who's learned something knows what that word means and what the connotations are. Therefore, when you're only teaching a single letter of it, it's a tremendous tzimtzum. Umikol shekain im tevis baruch, and how much more so would this be true if not just the letter on its own, but the whole word would be attached to other words. Tevis baruch hayam uchuberes tchila im od teva. If it will be connected to another word, how much more is the overarching or makif than even in a whole word? Baruch she'omar v'haya olam, if you would attach it to the sentence, Baruch she'omar v'haya olam, blessed Hashem, and who said, and the world came into being, v'haya olam. That's a tremendous haskalah. It's a huge idea, which the letter base doesn't do any justice to on its own. So shaya muvan mihem, that it would be understood from this whole sentence, Baruch she'omar v'haya olam, shaya muvan mihem, haskalah mufla, a wondrous idea, v'hu, which is eich shebamayim levad nivru kol ha'olamis. With one utterance, all of the worlds were created. Bli amal v'yagia, without any effort at all, because it's the as you'll quote the pasuk soon from Tehillim, Kuf Mem Ches, where it says, Hu tziva v'nivra'u, Hu tziva v'nivra'u. He commanded v'nivra'u, and they were created in the passive form. In other words, he didn't actively have to do something to create. The whole creation came about by itself because he said. In other words, his tzivui caused them to come into being. He didn't have to actually do the pu'ula of creating them. Utziva v'nivra'u. They were created. They were created in the passive form. Okay, so that's what he means here. Bli amal v'yagia. There was no effort involved. That automatically came into being just through the utterance of Baruch she'omar v'haya olam. As we know from the beginning of Bereshit, Vayomer Elokim Yehu Or Vayu Or, and so on and so forth. All the Inyan of Amira. Simple utterances. Uber Shoisho Hubechinas Amira Da'ak. So this Inyan of Baruch she'omar v'haya olam, who's it referring to? It's referring to the Madrega of Ak, from where all the Olamas descended. Shenivru Uboy Kol ha'olamas b'hashvo. That all of the worlds, when we say Baruch she'omar v'haya olam, that's referring to what was the olam that was created. That's referring to Ak, Adam Kadmon. Adam Kadmon, where all the worlds are included in one Amira. Right? They're all in this, so to speak, together. They're all in it together. Baruch she'omar v'haya olam is referring to Ak, shenivru b'chol ha'olamas b'hashvo, that all of the olamas within Ak, everything Ak contains all of the olamas that will come out later, and all of them are equal to, there's nothing that's greater or lesser. They're all of them together in legabe Ak, all of them bechinas bittul mamish. Where he explains that in the Siddur. Okay. And when we praise him, we bless him. When we say Baruch she'omar v'haya olam, the whole purpose of it is hamshocha, to bring down this inyan of Baruch she'omar v'haya olam, to bring it down below. In other words, to bring what down below? Not the olam. The olam is here. To bring the Baruch she'omar, he who said, to bring him below begiloi. Hu inyan giloi b'chinas ma'amar achas ha'koilo ha'tes mamoras. And this is the single maimer that includes all of the 9 maimoras. As there's various ways of explaining that. Pirka Avois, b'maimer echad hayachol divro es kol ha'olamas, right? B'maimer echad. And he didn't create it that way. He created it by Asara Mamoras, but nevertheless, the first Maimer, the word Bereshis, includes all of the other Maimoras. The word Bereshis itself, Nami Maimahu, it's also a Maimer, but it's a Maimer Kloli. That's what Chazal say. When they say by Asara Mamoras Nivra Ha'olam, there's 10 Maimoras. If you count them, there's only 9. So Chazal explained that the word Bereshis is also a Maimer. But it's a Maimer Kloli, and that's why it doesn't say before it, Vayomer Elokim Bereshis. Right? It just says the word Bereshit because the Maimah Kloli. And therefore it includes all of the other Maimoras, which are Maimoras Prati. Okay, so the Maimah Echad HaKoilo HaTes Maimoras. Ukshemafridim. Now, so when you separate out all of the various Maimoras into individual Maimoras, and then you separate the words into individual words, and then you separate all the words into individual letters, you can imagine what a tzimtzum this must be. Right? It's a tremendous tzimtzum. Ukshemafridim ois habeis bifnei atzmoi. when the letter base is separated on it, or any of the letters, but the letter base because it's the word Baruch, the beginning of the word Baruch, is base. Or kol haskola he. It doesn't have that whole inyan of Baruch She'omar V'Yo'elam. It has a potential for that because it's after all the letter base which could be joined together with the letters Reish Vav Chav, and then you would understand Baruch. But nevertheless, the letter base on its own doesn't have all of that haskola begilui. It only has it in potential. But because the haskola was already in the word Baruch before the letters became separated, therefore there is left in the ois a little bit of a roishem of the entire word. In other words, that or makif leaves a roishem even in one letter, in the letter base. And he's going to explain that a little bit more. It's only a reshimo related to the reshimo that we know about, where the oisius come out as individual oisius after the stalkus of the Orein Sof from the Koach HaGvul in the Orein Sof before the tzimtzum, that leaves the oisius on their own. But in the oisius is a reshimo of the original oil which was in them. That's called the reshimo. Reshimo bevad. ולפי הנויסה בהדוגמה מזה בהעניין shanu bo. And if we're going to give an example of this inyan in the subject that we've been talking about, who is miut levad, right? It's only the aspect of miut. It's not the aspect of siluk. Lo b'chinas siluk. V'shenishar rak reshimo chulu. In what we're talking about in our subject, when we say Baruch She'omar V'Yo'elam, when we're talking about the word Baruch, we're not talking about a siluk mamash when one letter is separated from another. We're not talking about a siluk mamash. We're only talking about a mute of the or. Okay, let's not get into it now because that's not the subject that he's going to discuss. He wants to get more into the explanation of what we can understand from these letters, from the tziruf letters and so on and so forth, and therefore why the sefiros hegenuzos there had to be a tzimtzum. The oasis are like kalim, and makom makom yesh loimer, shegam bazeh yesh shnei inyonim. Even in the oasis themselves, even though the oasis are kalim, there's still two inyonim. What are the two inyonim? Hainu mashu b'chinas miut levad, that inyan that is only a bechina of miut, right? Of a reduction in the oil. And there's also an inyan of siluk, kamoshi's bar, as we'll explain later on. So there's two inyonim. There's miuta or and the siluka or. What does it mean, siluka or? Siluka or means there's a radical break to the extent that what comes afterwards is on a different madrega altogether. Masha Einkein, when there's a muta or, that mute is only a reduction in size, but it's not a different mitzius. It's not a different inyan. Like for example, let's say the sunshine outside, and only a little bit of light though. The sun is not shining through the window, but there's a little bit of light. There's light that comes in from outside through the window. The light that comes through the window is also made up out of photons, just as the light of the sun, of the ray of sunlight itself, is also photons, and the ray in the sun itself is also photons. So there's all kinds of different levels. Only the only question is how closely they're packed together, so to speak. How individualized they become, and the weaker they become, the more they are sort of it's a ha'ora rather than it's a radiance of the light rather than the light itself. That's already ha'ora, and then there's ha'ora, de ha'ora, etc., etc. But that's only is mute. Masha ain't siluk. When there's a siluk ha'ora, then what comes out afterwards is a completely different. It's a different inyan. It's not the same inyan. Okay. So to continue with what we said before, Nisha Mimenu Ksasba Ois, there's a Roshim in the Ois of the original word, a Reshimo from the Or Makif. Nevertheless, Zeh HaBeis who Oisa HaBeis Mamish Haya B'Teves Baruch. The letter base now, after the tzimtzum, after the stalkus haor, is the letter base the way it was when it was part of the word Baruch, only that there's been a histalkus of the or, right? The or, the meaning behind that word was distalic. Because base could be the beginning of the word bais, it could be the beginning of the word ben or bat, or who knows, right? There's many possibilities that it belongs to the word Baruch. We would never have known, but there's a Rosham left in it. And we're going to explain how this is understood in the hegenuzos as well. V'atzmo habeis hamuvan legodol, and this letter base itself is understood to a mature and adult. Shemusag bo inyan habrocha be'ezeh madrega shehi. You'll understand the inyan of brocha on whatever level it may happen to be, because he understands what the letter of base of the word baruch or brocha is. Or inyan baruch she'omar v'ya'olam, you understand that inyan. Al derech zeh yuvan inyan tzimtzum shaya be'ez sefiros hegenuzos, will understand, therefore, um, the tzimtzum that affected the sefiros hegenuzos ba'oren sof baruch hu, as the tzimtzum was in the oren sof. Shebetchila, that right in the beginning, how you call sefiros b'his achdus, b'his arvus, b'his arvus. The sefiros were in a state of unification, and the state of his arvus, they couldn't be separated one from the other. There was no separation. Everything was mixed in together. It was all one Indian, basically. It was all one Indian. Not only were these letters not recognizable as independent entities, recognizable, discernible ois, because if not so, they would not have been able to be together in the Orient Sof before the tzimtzum. But in addition to that, they were illuminated with an oil which was an oil makif that included all of them and lifted all of them up into a much higher madrega. It's not that just a base and a reish and a vav and a chaf. Now there's the word baruch, and it's an overarching oil which includes all of the letters and transcends all of the letters. It's an or makif that includes and transcends all of them. It was not possible for the worlds, even the loftiest of worlds, in other words, Atilus, Akafilu, excuse me, Lekabel, his galus as a spirit, Moshe Bein Sof Baruch. They wouldn't have been able to receive, to accept, to continue to exist the way they are, had there been a giloy of the sefiros the way they are in the Or Ein Sof. Hey mitzad etzem ha'lasam, for two reasons. Whether we're talking about because they're on such a lofty madrega, etzem ha'lasan, shayu b'chinas pshitus lekamre, they were in a state of pshitus and a state of absolute simplicity. In other words, you couldn't divide one ois from the other. You couldn't divide one sefira from the other. You wouldn't know how, where one sphere begins and the next one ends, because they're in a state of pshitus. And also in terms of the giloi which enveloped them, this is also on a much higher madrega, obviously, than it was afterwards. Afterwards, only a roshim of that or. Im lo haya tzimtzum, therefore, had there not been a tzimtzum, sheyeh nimshach rak b'chinas chochma b'fnei atzma, so that chochma is nimshach as an independent sphera, and then bina is nimshach as an independent sphera, and chesed and gvura and tiferes, all of them are nimshach not behis arvus, but as independent spherois, with a certain protocol, a certain seder ishtalshlus, first chochma, and then bina, and then das, and then chesed and gvura and tiferes, and so on and so forth. And even though Chokhmah later on is still Chokhmah, Shaisak Klula Borein Sof, it's the same Chokhmah that was in Orein Sof, in Kola Esesridis like Nuzois, as it was together with all the other Esesridis like Nuzois, but when it's Misgale, as an individual Sphira, when it's drawn down as an independent, as a Sphira on its own, excuse It's not mixed in with all of the other aspects. That's a tremendous yerida for that particular oil, for that particular ois. Tremendous yerida. The Levada Yeridish on the day, Etzem is Galus. Not only is there Yerida because it becomes into revelation, and whenever it comes into revelation, there has to be a tziyur, otherwise it wouldn't be called revealed. There's a certain tziyur, and if there's a tziyur, there's an inyan of tzimtzum and metzius. So therefore, as soon as there's an inyan of his Galus, there's an inyan of metzius. As he explains, the Levada Yeridish on the Etzem is Galus, there's an asa b'chinas metzius davar. We can all put face, as we explained earlier. ובפרט כשנמשך ונסגר בפני עצמה שנעשה בבחינת מציאות דבר ואין בבחינת פשיטוס ממש, כמו שעשה קודם. So now when it's drawn down and revealed on its own as an independent sphera, it becomes a metzius, and it doesn't have the same pshitus at all as it had previously. Because the or had to be mistalek. The heder hapshitus are the gamkin is almost or. Because when it's no longer bechinas pshitus, in other words, when it doesn't, pshitus is when it doesn't have any gedorim that you can be magdir and say it's this and it's not that, it's that and it's not the other, right? That's what pshitus is. But here, the pshitus has been removed, and it comes to have a definition. In other words, it's misgala and a certain oifen, it's misgala with a certain tziyur, so it doesn't have that pshitus anymore. Adarabba, it has a certain tziyur, and that pshitus, therefore, harazigamkin is almost. This aspect, the header of pshitus, that the absence of pshitus is also called his almus or. It's the absence of light, it's the helem of the or. She'enu meir ba b'chinas plimius or begilu echol. The previous or is not meir into that particular ois because it's separated from the other oises. Like in the word baruch, there's an ois makif that includes an or makif that includes all of them, and when the oises are separated one from the other, it loses that or makif. Okay. Furthermore, that transcendent light that illuminated all of them is no longer there. Moshol Beis, like the Ayin Beis that we mentioned before. That when it was part of the word Baruch, Hayaboy Haskola, the brocha canal. It had the whole concept of brocha that we explained earlier. Nifrad, and when it becomes separated from the other three letters, just the letter base, it does not have that concept of Baruch She'omar V'Haya Olam. It just doesn't have it anymore. Rak ma'at, only a little bit. It has a roshim of what it was, but it's not the or itself. It's ma'at v'roshim bilvad chol kanal. When chokhmah is drawn down on its own, a barak ma'at me'or kadum, it only has a little bit of the or that was there before, of the or kadum, of the previous or, because it's nimshach ki'ilu as a separate sphera or as a separate ois, if we want to use the moshol of the word baruch, the base of the ois baruch. Kitzer al derech moshol teves baruch. That has a certain concept that can be melumash in these three oises, these four oises, in that particular tziruf, in that particular way. Then it has a certain askola. When you separate the word, the letter base on its own, then only has a little bit of the conceptual content that was in it before. There are a little bit of the concept, the ideas that it expressed before. It's the same letter that it was before. Similarly with Chokhmah, when it becomes separated on its own, in Lavad, not only does it separate from its pshitus, but also when it is revealed, it's only revealed in a way of mute, in a way of reduction of the or. It's not in a way of siluk. that we're talking about, but rather in a way of muta or. Okay, if there are any questions, I'll take questions. Otherwise, we'll call it a day. Any questions, gentlemen? Okay, doesn't look like there are any. Okay, so we will. I will put this up on YouTube. Probably about a half hour, 3/4 of an hour. Laila Tov.